There is something that nobody talks about when they explain why some people seem to attract money effortlessly, while others work twice as hard and still feel stuck. And it is not intelligence, it is not even luck, though a lot of people like to blame luck because it is easier than facing the real answer. The truth is that certain people carry invisible advantages that compound over time, and most of them were never taught to recognize these advantages in themselves or develop them intentionally. Today that changes, because once you see what these hidden assets actually are, you cannot unsee them, and more importantly, you can start building them right now, regardless of where you are starting from. Let me be clear about something before we go any further. This is not about shortcuts. This is not about hacks or tricks or some motivational speech that pumps you up for 48 hours and then leaves you exactly where you were before. This is about understanding the behavioral psychology behind why money moves toward certain people, stays with them, and multiplies for them, while it seems to slip through the fingers of everyone else. The difference is almost always rooted in assets that you cannot see on a balance sheet. The first hidden asset is what psychologists call a high tolerance for uncertainty. Most people are wired to seek certainty. It is a survival mechanism baked into our brains over thousands of years. When your ancestors did not know what was behind the next hill, uncertainty meant danger. That instinct is still running in the background of your brain today. But here is the problem. Every significant financial opportunity in the modern world lives inside uncertainty. Starting a business is uncertain, investing is uncertain, asking for a raise is uncertain, negotiating a deal is uncertain. The people who have developed a genuine comfort with not knowing the outcome, who can sit inside that discomfort without panicking and making impulsive decisions, have an edge that is almost impossible to quantify. They can hold positions longer. They can wait for better deals. They can take calculated risks that others run away from. And over time, that tolerance for uncertainty translates directly into wealth. The second hidden asset is relational capital, and I want to make sure you understand this beyond the surface-level version of networking that everyone talks about. Relational capital is not about collecting business cards or LinkedIn connections. It is about the depth of trust you have built with specific people over time. It is about the person who calls you first when a deal is forming. It is about the investor who introduces you to their circle because they genuinely believe in what you are doing. It is about the mentor who pulls back the curtain and shows you how things actually work behind closed doors. The people with the most relational capital are almost never the most outwardly aggressive networkers. They are the people who are consistently generous with their attention, their knowledge, and their connections without keeping score. They build relationships before they need anything. And then when an opportunity emerges, they have a room full of people who want to help them win. The third hidden asset is a calibrated risk perception, and this one is subtle enough that most people miss it entirely. There is a difference between someone who avoids all risk and someone who takes reckless risks. But there is a third category that most people never develop, which is the ability to accurately assess what is actually risky and what only feels risky. For example, leaving a stable job to build a business feels extremely risky because of the psychological weight of giving up something certain. But statistically, staying in a job that caps your income and your growth might actually be the riskier long-term choice. The people who have calibrated risk perception can separate the feeling of risk from the actual probability of a bad outcome. They use data, they use pattern recognition, they use experience, and they use outside perspectives to see risk more clearly than their emotions alone would allow. This leads them to make moves that look bold or even crazy from the outside, but that they have already stress-tested internally. The fourth hidden asset is the ability to delay consumption. I'm not talking about being cheap or living an artificially minimalist life. I'm talking about something much more specific. It is the psychological capacity to feel the pull of immediate pleasure or comfort and consciously redirect that energy toward a future outcome. Behavioral economists have studied this extensively. The famous marshmallow experiments from Stanford gave us a window into how powerful this ability is, not just in childhood, but throughout an entire life. Adults who have strong delay of gratification skills consistently accumulate more wealth, build more sustainable businesses, and make better financial decisions under pressure. But what most people do not understand is that this is a skill, not a personality trait. You can build it, you can strengthen it deliberately. And the way you do that is by connecting every act of restraint to a vivid, emotionally compelling vision of what you are actually choosing over what you are giving up. The fifth hidden asset is information asymmetry. This one makes people uncomfortable because it touches on something that feels unfair. And honestly, it kind of is. Certain people have access to information that others simply do not have. They know about the deal before it goes public. They know which market is about to shift. They know the right questions to ask because they have been in enough rooms to know what matters. And here is the key behavioral insight behind this. Information asymmetry is rarely accidental. It is almost always the product of deliberate choices made over years. The person who reads obsessively, who builds relationships with people who are ahead of them, who asks better questions, who puts themselves in environments where high-level conversations happen, that person gradually accumulates an information advantage that compounds quietly in the background. Every time they make a decision, they are working with a slightly better map than everyone else. And over time, a slightly better map leads to dramatically better outcomes. The sixth hidden asset is identity-level beliefs about money and worthiness. And this is where the behavioral psychology gets really deep. Your brain does not just respond to money as a resource, it responds to money as a reflection of identity. People whose internal narrative positions them as someone who belongs in financial success, who deserves it, who is capable of creating and managing it, will consistently make different choices than people who carry an underlying belief that wealth is for other people, or that wanting money is somehow shameful, or that they would not know what to do with it anyway. These identity-level beliefs operate mostly below conscious awareness. They shape how aggressively you negotiate, how confidently you pitch yourself, how quickly you give money away out of guilt, how often you self-sabotage right before a breakthrough. Changing these beliefs is not about repeating affirmations. It is about accumulating evidence through action that rewires what your brain considers true about who you are and what you are capable of. The seventh hidden asset is the ability to sell without feeling like you are selling. And I want to be very direct about this because the word selling makes a lot of people uncomfortable, and that discomfort is costing them enormously. Every financial outcome in your life is the result of someone being persuaded to give you money. Your employer was persuaded. Your clients were persuaded. Your investors were persuaded. The people who are exceptional at generating income have figured out that selling, at its core, is just helping someone else understand how their life or business gets better with what you have to offer. The psychological shift from selling as manipulation to selling as service changes everything. It changes how you carry yourself in a conversation. It changes how you handle objections. It changes how persistent you are. And the people who make this shift consistently outperform everyone around them financially, not because they are more aggressive, but because they are more genuinely helpful and more emotionally attuned to what the other person actually needs. The eighth hidden asset is pattern recognition across domains. This is one that separates people who get wealthy once, maybe by accident, from people who generate wealth repeatedly and consistently. Pattern recognition across domains means you can take something you learned in one area of your life and apply it to a completely different context in a way that gives you an edge. The person who deeply understands human psychology can see what is happening in a business negotiation that others miss. The person who understands systems thinking from engineering can apply it to financial modeling in ways that create insight that pure finance people would not reach. The person who has failed at a business and truly processed that failure has a map of what not to do that is worth more than any course or book. When you develop the habit of extracting transferable lessons from everything that happens to you, your rate of learning compounds. And compounding learning, just like compounding interest, eventually produces results that seem disproportionate to the effort being put in. The ninth hidden asset is emotional regulation under financial pressure. Money is one of the most emotionally charged subjects in human psychology. It triggers fear, shame, status anxiety, grief, excitement, obsession, and denial, sometimes all in the same week. The people who build and sustain significant wealth are almost universally people who have developed the ability to feel those emotions without being controlled by them. They can sit with a bad quarter and not make panic decisions. They can resist the euphoria of an early win and not overextend. They can look at a significant loss and stay grounded enough to make clear-headed decisions about what to do next. This is not emotional suppression. It is emotional literacy. It is the difference between being in the feeling and being at the mercy of it. And it is one of the most powerful competitive advantages that almost nobody is actively training. The 10th hidden asset is time orientation, and by that I mean the degree to which your decisions today are being made by your present self versus your future self. Behavioral psychologists have found that most people have a significant present bias, which means they systematically overvalue immediate rewards and undervalue future outcomes. But there is a smaller group of people who have developed what researchers call future orientation, a genuine psychological connection to who they are going to become and what that version of themselves will need and want. These people make decisions today that their future self will thank them for, not because they are disciplined robots, but because they have done the internal work of making that future self feel real and emotionally compelling. They have imagined it, written about it, connected to it emotionally, and they hold that image like a compass. Every financial decision gets filtered through the question of whether it serves or undermines the person they are becoming. That filter alone changes hundreds of small decisions every year in ways that compound dramatically over time. Now, here is what I want you to sit with for a minute. None of these 10 hidden assets require you to have been born into a wealthy family. None of them require an elite education. None of them are things that only certain people can access. Every single one of them is a skill, a habit, a belief, or a practice that can be developed by anyone willing to do the internal work. But, and this is the critical but, none of them are built by accident. They are built by people who understood they existed, who decided to take them seriously, and who consistently practiced developing them even when the results were not immediately visible. The reason most people never build these assets is not laziness, it is unawareness. You cannot invest in something you do not know is real. You cannot develop a skill you have never been shown exists. And that is what makes this conversation different from almost everything else you will hear about money and success. We are not talking about tactics. We are not talking about which investment vehicle to use or which side hustle to start. We are talking about the internal infrastructure that determines whether any tactic you try actually works for you or not. Think about two people who both get the same business idea at the same time. One has high relational capital, calibrated risk perception, strong emotional regulation, and identity-level beliefs that support success. The other has none of those internal assets developed. The first person will execute differently, relate to investors differently, handle the inevitable failures differently, and ultimately produce a completely different outcome from the same starting point. The idea does not change. The execution does not change. The market does not change. What changes is the internal architecture of the person operating within it. This is why behavioral psychology matters so deeply when we talk about money. Because the field of behavioral psychology has spent decades documenting exactly how our minds create invisible rules that shape every financial decision we make. And the extraordinary insight buried inside that research is that once you understand those rules, you can change them. You can update your internal operating system in ways that bring your behavior into alignment with the outcomes you actually want. That is not wishful thinking. That is neuroscience. The brain is plastic. Beliefs can be rewired. Behaviors can be reconditioned. Emotional patterns can be restructured. Identity can evolve. If you have ever looked at someone who seems to effortlessly attract good financial opportunities and thought there must be something different about them that I just do not have, I want you to hear this clearly. You were right that there is something different about them, but you were wrong that you cannot have it too. The difference is almost always one or more of the 10 hidden assets we just walked through, and every single one of them is within your reach. The first step is deciding to take them seriously. The second step is starting to observe them in yourself, honestly and without judgment. Where do you struggle with uncertainty? Where does your identity work against your financial goals? Where does present bias hijack decisions that your future self will regret? These are not comfortable questions, but they are the most valuable ones you can ask, because the answers will show you exactly where your leverage points are, exactly where a small amount of intentional development will produce the biggest return on your investment of time and energy. If this video made you think differently about what it actually takes to build wealth, I want you to know that this is exactly what this channel is about. Every single week, we go deep into the psychology behind why money moves the way it does and how you can align your thinking, your habits, and your identity with the kind of financial life you actually want to build. We are not here to give you hype. We are here to give you real insight that you can actually use. If you are not subscribed yet, do it now, because the next video we have coming builds directly on what we just talked about today, and you do not want to miss that piece of the puzzle. And if you have not checked out the other videos on this channel, I genuinely encourage you to explore them. There is a lot here that can shift things for you. We are glad you are here. Until next time.